to another episode of
Let's Get Spooky.
I'm Leanna Vamp.
I'm AJ.
And I'm Ashley.
And today we are talking about past lives and reincarnation and all that stuff. So first of all, do you guys believe in it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like,
I think about it and I'm like, it'd be cool. And I feel like, we don't know like what we are, like, I just feel like there's so many mysteries around it and about like our souls and stuff like that. And no one really knows much. But at the same time, like, I feel like our brains are so powerful that if you tap into it, you can do some crazy stuff with it, which could help you come up with these types of stuff.
I feel like it's real as shit.
I do too.
And I also feel like, your brain, you're only using a certain percentage of it, but like your souls are something that we've never been able to explain in like that kind of matter. And like what we're going to get into, I can't explain it, but I also, sometimes I feel like there's things about me that I can't explain and I don't feel like
it's coming from you.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, what the fuck? Like, why am I just like everyone else? And then...
So
who knows? Maybe I'm just a fucking weirdo. But
you could be weird, or you could be having like parts of a past life come about.
Yeah.
And we'll get into more of like signs of a past life in a little bit. But the whole idea of reincarnation is essentially that we are born and reborn. That energy never, and this is what I believe. I feel like energy is energy and it never completely goes away. It just finds a new place to go.
A new host.
And whether that's a person or it goes into the earth, or the energy is constantly being recycled. So I'm a firm believer that past lives are a real thing. I don't necessarily know that I have anything particular for me to say that I had a past life. There's, again, some weird things that I remember that don't kind of add up, but I can't say like I was a sailor in my past life or I was a this in my past life. I always joke that like I was an animal in my past life because I really love animals.
That's the thing though, because they were saying that your soul can go to animals, and I didn't read if that soul from the animal could go back into a human, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's all cyclical.
Right, because it's an energy source. So whether that energy source started in you or it started in a cat or it started in a horse, wherever it is, it's that energy that's moving.
Would it be so cool, like, if you and Cameron did past life regressions, and then they're like, Cameron used to be a chimpanzee, and you're like, great, I married a fucking chimpanzee.
He's pretty cool. I mean,
it's not a bad thing, cool. But then, like, when you think about his mannerisms, like,
what animal would he's like? What the fuck? Yeah, he walks around like this.
If I was married to someone and they were like, your husband used to be a gorilla, and then I'd watch him walk in a grocery store, I'd be like, yep.
I don't
Makes sense.
I don't think I've seen Cameron do anything like animal.
Maybe he was like
the first animal.
Maybe he was a butterfly.
He is he's like why are you guys talking shit right now? I do have to say that in a past life, for him, it's easier for me to analyze other people than it is for myself. But I have to say that in a past life, his life was something surrounded by animals, or maybe an animal, because he's like Snow White. No matter where we go or whose animals, I was talking to you about this. No matter what it is, like animals just are attracted to him. He could just like sit and like stray cats just walk up to him and like nuzzle his legs and stuff. So
I guess I was a murderer because babies hate me, people, animals. My maintenance man, they're all very passive with me.
We're going to learn a lot of new things.
Yeah, I know.
So why don't we start off? Because I know you had, Ashley, you have a lot of...
I had a lot of stories.
Stories, but also
just
like...
my microphone.
Not historical, but like factual information.
Should we start with the facts?
Yeah.
Let's start with the facts and then go to the signs.
Yeah, because we talked about what is a past life, and we already got into that. And essentially what we're going to go into too is very telling in children, but obviously people like us who don't have very vivid memories of living in a different time, are like, do we have any trace of our being that is from a past life? And so I think like we have the same list where we were going to talk about like if you have any of these things, and we haven't figured out, it never said if you have 4 out of 9 that you're considered to have one. But, a lot of these on the list, I feel like I do have. And so that's why I'm kind of curious. And I think...
Well, I think so. There's a list that I think we probably found the same list, and it's like 9 signs of a past life. But one interesting fact before we get to that is talking about most of these stories that we're all going to talk about are all from children. So they say that most children ages 2 to 6 is the age range where they these stories kind of come about. And they say because they're younger, they're closer essentially to like the other side. And you think about kids and ghosts. Kids and children are a lot more open. They haven't really developed or learned the things that we're taught as we grow up that's not normal.
Like a
If you don't-
filter.
Yeah.
Right. The filters
they're
are not
told to block that stuff out.
Exactly.
So they just kind of accept it a little bit
right.
more.
So they're not second guessing. If I say this out loud, are people going to think I'm crazy? They're just being a kid and saying what they feel and hear and all of those things. So they say that 60% typically come from boys, and 70% of these stories are usually surrounded around a tragedy. So people aren't remembering like, my past life, I was a farmer and I had goats and I had chickens.
Like it
and
would
I
have
used
to be something super extreme,
Right,
Because
it
that
was-
relates to the birthmark thing
Right.
that we talked
So,
about.
and 90% of them, in rare cases, were the past life different sex. So usually if it was a little boy, his story was about a man, or if it was a little girl, it was a story about a woman. And on average, the age of the people that their past life was about was like late 20s, early 30s. So which is really interesting of why that age range is significant. And I'm not sure, there's no real science of
Mine's not like that at all.
really.
Yeah. But we'll get into
Interesting. So there's obviously always exceptions to the rule. So let's start with some of the signs. You want to
Yeah.
pick one? And
So
then...
one of the signs is reoccurring dreams. I don't know why I said that so eloquently. Maybe because in my past life I was a fucking librarian.
There's so many things.
I know I have reoccurring dreams, and I guess that's a very basic thing because I think most of us have dreams that just kind of come back and you're like, fuck off. But I think at its core, if there's specific things and elements that you can't explain, that's what they're kind of pinpointing and saying.
Are
like,
yours vivid though? Like, do you do you feel like you're actually there?
Yeah.
And you can like point out details
Yeah.
and stuff.
But what's weird is I'll have the dreams and I'll kind of remember them when I wake up, and then I'll forget about it. And then like a week later, I'll have it. And then I'll see things out and it'll remind me of different parts of the dream. And then so when I have the dream again, I see those parts.
It like helps you hyper focus on the
Yeah.
things that were brought to
Yeah,
your
like
attention.
colors and smells and shit that don't
Oh,
relate
that's
to me
weird.
at all.
I don't know that I can say I've ever remember smelling anything in my dreams.
It's like, it's not that I can smell it. It's like the feeling that something would get that makes me like, you know, when you smell a cinnamon, you're like, that's home. It's like this certain
my soul
smell
right
where like
there.
a smell reminds me of a dream. And I'm like, damn.
What is the reoccurring dream or reoccurring
there's
dreams?
two reoccurring dreams. One of them I think is just a plain out nightmare because it's me in a hallway and I keep having to open doors, and then there's doors on the side. And then when I open one, that shuts and the hallway gets smaller, the doors get smaller, and then the doors on the side are all these people that I used to know.
We talked about this
Yeah.
in our dream episode.
Yeah, and then the other one is like I'm in a forest and then there's a clearing, and the clearing has 4 pyramids, but the pyramids aren't like big ones. They're kind of small. They'd be like the size of a house. And then I'm walking through it, and then they start moving backwards. And so it feels like almost like silly putty, where as I'm moving through it, it's being pulled out. And then there's like 5 guys on each side, and I can't see who they are. And they're just
Weird.
standing
So-
there looking
so
at
weird.
me.
That's interesting because both of those dreams have people.
Yeah, and,
people
and this weird
around
stretch
you.
thing. Yeah.
Huh.
Like I feel like time is being pulled, and I don't.
So maybe as we like uncover all of these things, we're going to take notes about her because I feel like
Yeah.
you have more of more things that are attached to all of these different signs than
Yeah.
I personally do. But one interesting thing, and you already mentioned it without even mentioning it, is deja vu. And deja vu, they say, is a huge indication of the possibility of a past life. And granted, all of these things are just things. They don't necessarily mean anything. This whole reincarnation and past life subject is something there's no science behind it. There's no facts behind it. It's just interpretation, and a lot of it comes from religious beliefs. Past lives go back about like 3,000 years. So people have believed in this for a very long time. But deja vu is a very interesting subject. I personally have deja vu all the time.
Same.
All the time. And it makes me feel a little crazy because there's certain things, and it's typically nothing crazy. It's very mundane things. It's like setting up to film and I go to reach for something and I remember doing that.
Yeah.
So there's actually a couple different types of deja vu. There's deja vécu, which is an event that you've experienced in a past life. So like for you, if you're saying this is a thing that I've already been at. I've experienced this event before. There's déjà senti, which is something already felt, usually triggered by something like a voice or music or a smell. So that's like the whole, like you smell the Cinnabon or whatever he's using an example. And then there's a déjà visite, which is being in a place that feels so familiar, like you've been there before.
That's what I get a lot.
I get that, and I get the smell thing. Like, there's been times where, like, I don't know how to describe the smell, but kind of like, have you ever been to like one of those like old mining towns and stuff? And there's like a certain smell
like
that
earth
comes
smell, or
almost.
like
But for some reason, like I wonder if I do believe in this. I wonder if I was like a miner or something in my past life, because like, what if my fears is like being like in like a tunnel or something, and like having it like collapse on me.
Yeah.
And then like, this sounds dumb, but like when we go to like to Knott's Berry Farm, and there's that one train thing, for some reason when I'm in that, I feel like I get this weird feeling, like I feel like this is right.
You feel like it's right.
Yeah. And like the smell like gets me in like this weird mindset.
Quit your job and become a miner, damn it.
I mean,
This
maybe
feels
I
right.
might
It
have
feels
died
right.
that way. I
It's
might have
very-
died
You
that
only
way.
have
It's
one
very
life, or
dangerous.
maybe you have two. Why not be a miner in both?
But you've already done it. You don't need to do
yeah,
it
but
again.
it might be a sign that she should like pick up her shovel
up
again.
again.
Pick up your shovel and you're
Pick
gonna
up your
strike
tools.
gold. Use your tools.
Use your tools.
Use your tools. But yeah, I don't know. There's like certain things like that where if I'll read a book or watch a movie that's related to like, you know, old timey miners and stuff, I don't know. It
That's
makes me
really
feel a certain way.
interesting. That's
Yeah, I don't
super
know.
interesting.
Shit.
So deja vu, I feel like most people have had deja vu, and you know what that feels like. And it's a really strange feeling when it happens, because at first to me, I always think, did my brain just have a hiccup?
Yeah.
Like, am I actually just I'm not reliving the memory, I'm actually having the memory, but my brain just like did a little brain fart and it thinks that we're doing it again.
Like a glitch in the matrix
Exactly.
maybe or something. Yeah.
But I have it really often, and a lot of the times I have it with things that I've never encountered before. Like, I'll be in a place and I'll see someone's face, but then in my mind I've seen them before. But I've obviously never, it's a new state or a new country that I've never been to. There's no way I've seen them before. So when things like that happen to me, I always have that, what was this? Who was I before? And
Mine
I
is
always
like
instantly
that
think that.
with corners of rooms for some weird reason. Like I'll see certain corners of rooms and I'll be like, I've seen that before. It's very strange. It's not like entire scenarios. It's like corners.
Weird.
Like I'll be in restaurants, or I'll be in like hotels, or I'll just like be in some random store, or like a basement or something. And I'm like, I've seen that before.
Like just the design element of it, the way it looks like.
the way that it feels and like the way that it makes me feel. I'm like,
So
I've
you were
been
an
here.
architect in your past. Well, you actually did that in your current life, but maybe
Yeah,
you were
triggered.
more of an architect in your past life. So you had recurring dreams.
Yep.
So there's deja vu.
And then there's
what else?
remembering past events you weren't at, which I don't have.
That would kind of fall under the category of deja vu, like similar to.
I think they're meaning more specific things. Like if you were to be like reading a book about, you know, a bombing or something, and be like, oh, I've been there.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like stuff like that. Where
Gotcha.
it's very
Like all of our
specific.
past life
yeah,
stories that
it's
we're gonna
like,
talk about.
oh, you were in that war. Oh, like I could be like, hey, like I have reoccurring visions of me working at Forever 21.
But not necessarily like a vague memory, like an actual event, an actual thing in history that did happen.
Yeah, like a big old thick boy of an event.
So that was on my list of unusual memories. So same thing of remembering things that clearly there's no way that you should know. Fears and phobias, I found was a really interesting thing. Most people have fears. People are all afraid of something. You're afraid of heights, you're afraid of the dark, whatever, you're afraid of things. Some people have more extreme fears, and those delve into the realm of phobias. But where it gets weird is when those fears and phobias are irrational, and also when they're associated with a 2 to 6 year old.
Yeah.
So if a kid is extremely afraid of baby doll heads, but has never seen a
they're
baby
not
doll.
cute.
I mean, that's cute. That's cute. Or like
If they're afraid of that, like
the crystal ball.
crystal ball.
Like a crystal sphere, and there's no reason for them to be afraid of it. But maybe in their past life, they were crushed to death by a giant
Or even
crystal
like
sphere.
baths. Like there was a kid who was afraid of going in the bath, and it was because like they did a past life and he had drowned in his past life.
Oh yeah. I
it's
had a weird. She wasn't weird. I had an art teacher, and I went
She
on
wasn't weird.
there was like a school trip or something. I don't remember, but we were, you know that long stretch of highway that's next to the ocean, like Oxnard area from like Santa Barbara?
Kind of. Yeah. Is it Pacific Coast Highway? PCH?
PCH.
Yeah.
So we were driving down that, and she was saying like how whenever she drives on freeways next to like an ocean like that, she gets really bad anxiety and starts freaking out, and her feet feel really heavy. So she always thought that her past life, she was maybe like a mobster or someone that got killed by the mob, and they
like,
put cement on her feet and put her in the ocean or something.
I mean, that makes sense.
Which I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
For some reason, that story always stuck out to me.
Well, PCH is scary as hell when you drive on it because there's certain parts of it where you're literally like overhanging and you don't see, you see like the cliff and then there's just water and you're like, I might fall off into the ocean.
Can't
so
see
it's
'em,
already
yeah.
scary. But that's a pretty interesting, like,
It's weird that like the feet thing happens at the same time that she sees like
the ocean.
ocean or
As long
driving
as she doesn't
by
get
it,
a lead foot and forgets to hit the brake.
yeah, I know, and flies off.
Fuck.
She's seeing her own destiny.
My feet won't move.
What else is on this list?
Mystery pains.
Oh yeah,
don't
mystery
know.
aches and pains.
Do you guys ever get mystery pains?
I mean, I feel like I'll get like a weird pinch or like a weird, but I'm like, oh, I just like tweaked a nerve or something, but it's not a reoccurring. It's like, oh, that feels weird. And then it goes away and I don't feel it again.
Yeah.
But I know personally people that have medical conditions where they've been to so many doctors and every time they do all of these tests and they basically tell them after testing them and they're clearly not well and they're like, you're perfectly fine. Your tests are 100% fine. And you're like, most of those people are deemed hypochondriacs or you're just making it up or you're seeking attention, which maybe they are in certain cases, but I know personally cases where they are sick and they cannot find anything wrong with them. So I feel like that would be an extreme case. Again, it doesn't necessarily fit into the whole past life thing of being children because usually the people that I know are adults.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't personally have any like weird pains that I can't account for.
No.
I get like only one weird pain and I can't explain it. And it doesn't feel like a pain in a muscle or like a bone. It feels like someone took like 3 needles and just like shoves it into my knee on the side. And it's a very specific side. And I didn't realize until like I looked at my legs in the mirror because I'm like, they're very white. Like I realized this like 5 years ago where there's like a certain little bump on the side of my leg, which I've never gotten x-rays on my leg. So I could just have a fucked up knee from something. But like it's a very little bump and it doesn't feel like that is like scraping against anything. It just feels like someone's putting needles into
in
it.
it.
And it'll last for like a minute and then it'll go away.
Maybe you were probed by aliens in your
Not.
knee.
In the knee and not the
knee.
ass?
Yeah.
That's not very alien of
Maybe
them.
they're like,
something
we've
new.
done enough of the butts.
Yeah.
We need
But
to
that's
try
the only
enough.
thing.
colon exploration. We're doing knee stuff now.
And it could just be a fucked up nerve, but I'm like, it just, I don't know.
And that's how I feel like when I have weird aches and pains, I'm like, it's not a constant. It's not like I have a weird pain in my shoulder and I always have it and I get it every day. It's just weird. Like our bodies are
They're fucking
different.
weird,
They're
man.
weird.
They're
so
weird.
another one is passions. I'm going to put these kind of under the same thing because it's 2 separate things, but it's passions and uncontrollable habits. Like you figure someone that has OCD.
Yeah.
You're obsessive about a certain pattern or a thing, or you have to do things a certain way. But when it's irrational or doesn't make sense, like a strong passion, there's a lot of these little kids and they'll be obsessed with, like in my story, the little boy's obsessed with planes. And not like a normal kid, you like planes, you like dolls, so you play with them, or those are your favorite types of toys. Like to the point where they're hyper focused. That's the only thing that they can focus on. Obsessive behavior over something that you shouldn't.
There's no reason.
There's no
Because
reason
they've never
for it.
been exposed to it.
Right. And again, I've said it before, but all of these things separately could just be weird quirks about a person. They don't necessarily mean like, oh, if you're obsessed with candles doesn't mean that you were a past life was a candle
Candle
maker.
means you like
know?
candles.
It just means you like
You're a
candles.
proper adult.
But if you are like in a house and you only have candles in your house and the only thing you talk about is candles.
You
and
might work at Yankee Candle.
You might have created a
that
Yankee
discount.
Candle. And then what? Let's see. What
Did
else
you
do I
see
have?
the one that was like you recognize someone as your soulmate, which I feel like is a
no, I
little
didn't see
bit
that one.
cheesy? We might have a different list of 9.
I think we probably
But that
do.
was one of mine. It was like you recognize someone as a soulmate, which I plead the 5th on that, knowing that I have not found one of those, so I'm not.
But But how would that make a
I don't
be a
know,
past
because
life?
it's like a soulmate. Like a
I
soul
think it's
thing.
like
Oh,
your
like your soul.
two
Like,
souls
yeah.
that somehow always connect
Yep.
in different
Got it. So like
times.
say Cameron and I in our next life are
You're married,
he's Joe and I'm Mary, but we
You still
are
fuck.
like,
each
it's
other,
my
yeah.
soulmate.
and you feel like
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I don't. That's not me. I'm like, I'm alone.
I mean, I think it's really interesting if you could remember, because they're saying a lot of these past life stories the kids either forget, and I don't feel like they necessarily forget. I think they're trained to forget. I think most parents that are experiencing something like this, it's kind of traumatic. So they don't necessarily want their kid to believe that's not their real name. These aren't their real parents. They're trying to make them believe that what they're feeling in their mind or all of that past life stuff isn't real. So I think that goes away. They forget, or they choose to like bury all that stuff and go on with a regular life. So I find that really interesting as an adult. If you were to find your soulmate and continue to find your soulmate, that's like,
I mean,
you're
there's
pretty
some
heavy.
people that I meet. I feel like I've met a couple people where I'm like, I feel like I've known you forever,
Yeah, I've
but
gotten
like
that.
you literally
yeah.
just met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be, and you don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be like, when we think of it, we typically think of a romantic relationship.
It could be friends.
It could be
Like,
a
you could be
friend.
friends in your
Yeah,
life.
it could be a relative.
That's why maybe some people feel so intertwined with their pets and stuff. Like they actually, like for me, like I've never had a pet, but I do see people's relationships with their dogs and stuff that's almost like telepathic, and I don't understand it. And I just feel like it's this thing where I'm like, I don't understand, but
It's
you
a
do.
connection,
Yeah, like
yeah.
it's a connection that I actually don't understand. And it's not just because I'm bitter, but it's just like I think
You
there's
love
something.
animals.
I think
Jealous.
there's something going on in there.
Yeah. The last one that's on my list, and I think the one that is the most compelling, is that of birthmarks. And when I first saw this, I'm like, birthmarks? That's weird. Like, how does that have anything to do with anything? So on my list, there was a story about a young boy. This was in 1960. So granted, now I feel like people having a past life, even if it's kids know how to use technology. They know how to use the iPad. They know how to use the phone. They can Google things at like 3 years old. You know, it's crazy. But in 1960, the chances of that are very slim to zero. It didn't
Google
happen.
shit.
Yeah, they're not Googling.
So this little boy claimed to remember the life of a man named Maharam, who was killed with a gunshot fired at close range. The boy had an array of birthmarks on his chest that could possibly correspond with a gunshot wound. But the way that they're saying is basically his birthmark was a scattered like birthmark on his chest. At first, they're thinking, well, that's just a coincidence. But why would a little boy know about someone being shot in the chest at close range by a shotgun, know the man's name? And when they actually did the research, they did find a man named Maharam that was shot by close range in the chest by a shotgun, and wherever the shotgun things were right where his birthmark was. And I'm like, how do you, maybe in 2020, that's easy to like, oh, he looked it up, or he's found a newspaper, or he saw something. But in 1960,
And I doubt they're talking about that on the news.
no,
Yeah.
because it's weird, and it's also not like, can't be proven. So I don't know if anybody's stories have birthmark things in them. Mine personally
Mine
doesn't.
do.
But that's weird.
Mine has some heavy birth on the mark territory.
It's so weird. And I feel like as much as you want to try to justify all these stories and not make the kids seem like they're just using their imaginations, when there's facts and the facts are checkable, how do you explain that?
Yeah.
And maybe we can't. And maybe that's the thing. And that's why there's so much fascination behind it, because it's not a science. We can't say like, here's the rule book to past lives and reincarnation. If you check all the boxes, then yes, you did have a past life.
Yeah, you can't like do any like tests like blood work or something that will prove like, yes, this was you in a past life.
If you could, if it was relevant enough, yes, you could. But a lot of these things, like we said
You
before,
can't have DNA for your soul. Like that's like a thing where it's impossible.
yeah, soul science is not a real science, I don't think.
I have two that are kind of intertwined, where it's you feel like an old soul and you feel like you don't belong in this time, which is something I feel all the time, and I like don't talk about it unless I'm like sarcastically talking about it.
In
or
what sense, though?
I just don't feel like the way that technology, like I feel like I don't really like technology, and I constantly find myself drawing to the 1920s over and over again, where I'm like, every time I see something from that or I watch something, like I feel good and I can't explain it. But every time I think about traffic and updating my phone and like even like doing shit like where I'm like using my camera, I go towards vintage photography in my work because I like crave that. Like I don't like new shit.
Yeah.
And it feels like anything that brings me that nostalgia, which I have not experienced because I'm not 100 years old. I just feel like I would be happier back then.
Yeah, less distractions. Technology is
yeah.
a huge distraction, although very convenient because you
It's
think
convenient.
it
and-
sounds great to be like, oh, I would love the 1920s, but like,
I mean, I love women's rights now more than they were in the 1920s,
Right.
but I would say that I'm happy now, but there's something about that era that makes me feel weird. Like, and it's
Like,
not the
you're
30s,
attracted
it's
to
not
it.
the 40s, it's the fucking 20s, and it's just this weird. And I also feel like my patience for people, like people my age, I fucking hate people my age. I still love you if you watch the show, but it just like people.
If you watch the show,
don't,
everyone
we
who
hate
does
you.
a lot of like my really good friends that I've met my best conversations with are all old as shit. Like
Yeah.
everyone who I respect in terms of
she doesn't respect us.
Oh.
She just
No,
said
cool.
it.
no, well, no, like people who have lived longer than me and who have like this knowledge. I feel like
experience.
I just gravitate towards them where I don't want to go to parties and I don't really want to get fucked up. I want to like sit down and have like, you know, a glass of wine and talk about like deep shit. And some people just want to talk about business and they want to talk about their Instagram. And I'm just like, I fucking don't care anymore. Like I just
Yeah.
want to talk about like weird old shit.
So where I'm trying to analyze, so you're an old soul, trapped in a hallway. By the end of this, we're gonna have it. We're gonna
Maybe
have a
I was a
great
prisoner.
story.
Stretchy pyramids.
Pyramids. Yeah, I see that, and I think there's a lot of people that you even like. I see it specifically with younger kids when you see kids that are just like beyond their years, and you see it a lot in like kids that are actors or kids that are when you see certain shows and you're like, wow, that kid is like. They shouldn't be able to like talk like that or say those things or hold those types of conversations because they're too young, but they're probably an old soul and maybe were an old man before they were a child actor. Who knows?
No, I know kids who like look into my like eyes and they really look at me and I'm like, that's creepy. But I feel like they
know
they've
you.
been through
They're,
some
like,
shit.
really they
your
knew
soul.
you
They've
when
been
you
through
were
some shit
in the
man.
1920s.
I don't know, man.
Okay, so do you have any more signs of past life? I think that's
all
all
my
of them.
signs. Signs point to past lives, bitches.
So we'll start with our past life stories because we each have a different story and they're all fairly different.
Yeah,
We have different stories. They're
I
very
think
different.
so. I can start with
and
mine.
you go first.
Mine are about two twins, and it was in the 1940s, and there was the Pollocks, which is the husband and wife, and in 1946 they have their first kid named Joanna. And wow, I can't speak. Joanna's their first child. So this is not when they're twins yet. They're just sisters right now. So there's Joanna, and then in 1951 they have Jacqueline. And they're super close sisters. There's very distinct traits about them. One is like shorter and a little stubbier. One is very tall. One is more creative.
Were they very
One-
far apart?
They'd be
Age-wise?
5 years apart.
Okay.
But
A decent gap.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
decent.
they're sisters, they're close, and then the older one has this very like motherly kind of trait about her where she always has to take care of the little one, and that's a very like, you know, specific thing. Like she feels inclined to be that person. So they are walking one day with another boy, and this car comes raging behind them and just fucking runs them all over. They all die. And so obviously the parents are distraught and they're like, we don't want to have any more kids. But then a few years later, the wife, who is Florence, she finds out that she's pregnant. And when she goes to the doctor's like, yeah, you're going to have one kid. But the husband, for some weird reason, he's really fascinated with reincarnation. And he has this book that he was always reading. And as soon as the doctor said that, he was like, no, we're going to have two twins. I can feel it. I feel like it's the reincarnation of my daughters. And the wife was like, fuck you. It's one kid. Like, ease up.
She's like, I don't want two inside
Yeah,
me.
because they were both super Catholic and she was more Catholic than him. So she was like freaked out. She's like, you need to stop sounding like a crazy person.
Yeah.
So on the day of the birth, 2 babies come out.
What?
With the same exact birthmarks as the 2 daughters. And
Wait, the 2 daughters that were
Yep.
That were
aged
separate, but
age,
now
had the
they're-
same birthmark?
Yep, same exact birthmarks.
Huh.
So they named them Jen and Jillian, also 2 J names. So what's interesting is they have the same birthmarks. One of them has the same exact scar over her eye that one of the deceased.
How does she
did.
have a scar? She was born with it?
Mhm.
So her scar was essentially like
It
a
started-
birthmark.
Yeah, it started showing. They would talk about the toys that. So what happened was, when they got in the car accident, the parents decided to move out of that town to like not deal with the scenario anymore. So they moved away and into a new house, and they stored the old daughter's toys in the attic. So the kids never knew what those toys looked
They
like.
probably never even knew
And
that they
would
had
always,
sisters.
So they always would talk about these toys, and then the mom was like, "What the fuck?" So she brought them down, and immediately they started being like, "This is mine, this is yours," and it was exactly separated as to whose toys were whose. And so then
so creepy.
they had an irrational fear of cars, and they would always talk about the accident whenever they would see a car, and they'd see like, the car is coming for us.
How do you how do you explain that? How do you
Yeah.
explain these little girls that have never, they didn't even know they had sisters, let alone know that their sisters were killed in a car crash, and they have all of these stories that are just like in their brain, like they were born with them in their brain. How do you can't.
And they both, one of them is more motherly. They both distinctively like certain foods that originally the 2 other girls liked distinct foods.
So the character traits
Yep.
have
They
transferred into
walked
the
the
twins.
same way as them. It was like all these personality traits. One was a little bit more outgoing. One was more creative.
So
It was-
did the dad obviously believed it
Oh,
because
yeah.
he was super into it. What did the mom, did it have any
The
notes
mom
about,
is still freaked out, but she just kind of went with it, obviously, because she's like, I
because of
have
her
2
babies?
daughters.
Yeah.
So essentially, it was kind of like this whole scenario where it was a reincarnation, which I find interesting, of 2 obviously different aged beings, but to reincarnate 2 souls at the same time within the same family, like, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
It's freaking weird. And then the dad to just read a book and be like, yeah, it's going to happen to
Yeah.
our family one day. It's like, what the fuck?
To me, that means that those little girls, their energy and their souls weren't meant to go yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes bad things happen to good people, and sometimes bad things just happen, and it's nobody's fault. It just happens. But those little girls' souls were meant to continue on and do more, so they didn't leave. They
Yep.
just waited until they could come into the bodies. And I mean, that's pretty epic for the parents. I mean, I know the mom was probably struggling with it, but that's pretty insane.
What's weird is the mom didn't tell them right away that they had 2 sisters that had passed. So she was just kind of like bracing for impact to be like, by the way, all this stuff that you're talking about happened to your sisters.
Which is like, makes it that much more powerful that
Yeah.
they had no clue about them even having sisters. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
That would be I mean, I would love that.
Yeah. I don't know. I would be like, ugh, but
I feel like there's a lot of times, especially with parents and kids and bad things happening to their children, where you try to justify things. Like, you want to see things that aren't there, and you want to make things mean something that they don't mean because you're so attached to something. But to have that and then see it in your new children.
I would
you know?
definitely fuck up the names. I would, if they're all J names, I would immediately just start.
calling them different.
Yeah. I would call them by their old names, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like what you were saying, like that's where my head first went, where I was like, well, they're grieving parents. They obviously miss their first children. They're probably like seeing, because I mean, you can see things from other people and that you've lost in others. So I didn't like, my first thought was like, oh, well, maybe she's just like, they're like, oh, that's exactly how this J named child did that. And oh, you're doing it just like them.
Yeah.
But it's the birthmarks and stuff that
And
you
the
can't
fear
really
of cars. Like,
Yeah.
they're literally terrified of vehicles, like all of them.
And again, like going back to the list, any of those things separately would mean really nothing. It would just be like, oh, maybe they don't like cars, or maybe she doesn't want to wear the blue dress because she doesn't like blue, or she doesn't like green. But to have things and then to be able to justify them, like, oh, that makes sense here, but then it also makes sense here, and then it makes sense here. How do you turn your back on that?
Yeah, it's when you check off multiple of the boxes, not just like 1 or 2.
And then also, do you tell the children, and I feel like you wouldn't want to say anything to the kids because you want the kids to feel like they're their
their
own
own
person.
individual
Yeah.
person.
They're not just somebody else. But that's got to be super powerful the dad was probably like, I was
The
right.
dad was like, fuck yeah, I'm a genius. He probably has a cult now.
He probably does.
Reincarnation cult.
Yeah, man. But yeah, that's my story.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's creepy.
that's really interesting.
I mean, it's creepy in the sense, like, not in a bad, creepy way. Like, it's in a creepy way that's like, oh, wow, that's actually really, like, heartfelt, but a little scary.
I think it would be triggering as the mom to, like, once you've already, buried your children, to have to, like, be like, oh.
Yeah.
It's literally like deja vu.
yeah, and
Well,
then
'cause-
now you're like overprotecting these
Yeah.
ones because you're like something
don't want
happened
anything
already
bad.
to the other ones.
But do you think, too, like, what happened? So that soul of those two daughters that passed went into these new daughters, these twin daughters. But do you think, like, does the mom think, well, who could have they been? Like, if these souls were they different people and then the old souls took over them, or
Yeah.
is it, like, I don't know. That's where my mind kind of starts spinning around because you're like, were they supposed to be other people? Or were they supposed to be?
But then were we supposed to be other people? Like, where did our souls come from?
That's true.
And also, wasn't there like a time period between them
Yeah.
dying? So
Yep.
it's like, what did their souls do in between that
Yeah,
time?
there
Is there
was,
like
they
a
hung out.
waiting room where they just
Yeah.
kind of hang out?
They're
And
chilling.
I'm thinking like Beetlejuice,
Like the
where
sperm
he's
bank.
sitting with the
Yeah.
number, and they're like, okay, your time is up. Your mom's having another kids. Okay, time. I don't know. That's where my
Yeah.
dumb brain.
I mean, it has to be, right? They have to go somewhere. They don't just go
Maybe they're
they don't just
floating.
like,
I don't know. Maybe it's residual energy that, like, stays with the family. I don't know. Because then it's like, well, why is it in that family? Like,
I think that if the dad believed that, the dad definitely was putting that sort of energy into
Yeah.
not letting them go, and that could have been
maybe.
attachment to something until they had a new host, but not in a bad way, like a new
Yeah.
host in a good way. Okay, AJ, what's your story?
Mine's also a child. So it's a 4-year-old in Louisiana. He was a boy, and him and his family started believing that he was a World War II pilot that was shot down during the war. So it kind of started where he was he'd wake up from these like dreams, like screaming about his plane going down and talking about like, plane crashes and stuff like that. And like, you're like, what's wrong with my kid? Why does
Yeah.
he keep waking up from these things? But then it went deeper than that to where, like, he had like a little toy plane, and the mom would point at stuff and be like, oh, that's where the bombs are. And he'd be like, no, that's he would come up with the correct names. Like, he'd be
he
like,
would
no,
know
that's
things
the
about the
drop
plane.
tank. Yeah.
How old was he?
4 years old. So like he would know the specific names for certain things, and he would correct things. So like his parents would be watching like a documentary on World War II, and one of the specific things they said were on the show, they were saying that a Japanese plane is called a Zero, and he was like, no, they're called Tonys. That's a Tony. And then apparently that's correct. And I didn't check that fact.
Yeah.
But there was like different facts where like he would correct people on things, and they'd be like, oh no, yeah, you are right.
You're 4 and you're
Yeah,
smarter
you're 4
than
and
me.
you're smarter than me on like something that you don't really know much
Yeah.
or you shouldn't know much about. And then he was saying that his name in the past life. So when they started kind of exploring it, he said his name was James. And he said that he was on the ship Natoma. So his parents kind of
I
looked
saw this
into
one,
it.
yeah.
And they found the USS Natoma Bay, and that James Huston was at that ship, and he was killed in action. So like they were actually able to find details from history that were connecting to all the stuff that the little boy was saying.
Yeah. So, because I know you're still a little bit on the fence, how do you
Yeah.
explain that? Like, how would a 4-year-old have access to World War II historical information,
Yeah.
know things about planes that they've never seen before? Like, how?
Maybe he's just really smart. I mean, the fact that his parents were also watching World War II documentaries, like, I don't know if maybe they did that before he was born, because I just feel like as a child, you take certain things in without realizing it. So maybe he did take these certain things in, and then all of a sudden was just kind of spouting them out because he thought they were interesting.
Well, okay. So I agree and I disagree, because I've seen shows like Ellen, and they have like the weird not weird, but like I was gonna say the weirdly smart kids, but like the super smart
Weird
kids
kids.
that will name
Gross.
like every dinosaur known to man. And you're like, how
Or like
did you?
the presidents and stuff.
They know
and
the
I'm like,
presidents,
dude, I
all the
can't even
states,
name
the
them.
capitals.
states,
Like
all those
there's
things.
there's kids that are really fucking smart, but are they really smart because they sat and read it when they can't read yet, or are they really smart because they were in a past life? He was around and he was an oh my god. Archaeologist,
Yeah. Archaeologist.
and he worked with dinosaur fossils. Like,
Yeah.
where does that come from? It goes both ways. But when a kid like that was most likely not exposed, the thing that I read about the story you're talking about is that he wasn't exposed to anything like World War II, like, because the documentaries and stuff, a lot of those, they're not necessarily violent, but they're a little gruesome for kids to watch. So it's not like the family was like, when you're 3, let's sit down for Friday night TV and watch these people die. It'll be great family fun.
Also, like when you're 4, like I know when I was 4, even if I was smart, which I'm not, I wouldn't like look up a random guy and be like, okay, I'm going to take on this guy's persona. Like
be
if
this
I,
person.
yeah, like I just feel like, and I think that was the one too where they went to like a museum and he was like obsessed with being in the World War II section, and it was a whole plane museum and he didn't want anything to do with anything else. It was like only that felt like home to him.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something where even if you were like a kid who wanted to play different parts, like why just pick one? And if he wanted to be someone else as a kid, you can be whoever you want. So one day he could be James, the next day he could be whoever. So it has to come from somewhere, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, maybe because I want to believe it, because I want it to be real. I'm so like, no, this is right. This is right. And again, there's always like that weird chance that maybe he saw some show, or maybe he heard something on the radio and he heard that name, and that, like you're saying, it stuck with him and he hyper focused on it. But to have so many facts and checkable facts.
Yeah.
It would be one thing if he was like, my name was James, and that was all he knew.
I kind of wish he knew the last name. I think that would seal it more for me, because it's not super hard to be like this one name of a ship and it'd come up with like a generic.
Right.
Like,
if you've
map.
heard enough
Well,
around
the drop
it.
tank thing is a little
So
scary.
the specifics about a piece of equipment that you've never seen, or as a child it's not even around anymore. So you would have had to have seen old footage or in a museum, or have someone teach you about it. Those things to me are all like, I chalk those up as like, that's something beyond our realm of understanding. So my story is about a little boy, and his name is Cade. And there was a list of 9/11 stories, which 9/11 is, in the grand scheme of things, more recent than a lot of the things that you guys are talking about. So Cade is 3 years old, and he begins waking up from nightmares in the middle of the night screaming that he's falling. So at 3, before then, he was very advanced for his age. He started walking or standing up at like 2 months. And usually kids don't start standing up and walking till they're about a year or older. So he was very advanced for his age from being an
Sounds
infant.
possessed.
He might have been possessed.
Did his
or-
eyes glow?
Not that I know of. His eyes didn't roll back.
Did he
in his
have
head.
her?
mother's milk?
So the grandmother said that when he was born, he always kind of looked like he was analyzing, like he was scanning the room. He was an old soul, like you had mentioned before. He was beyond
Elon
his years. He's Elon Musk as a baby. So he, at the age of 3, also would start talking about how he died and his death. And at first the mom was like, wow, this is strange. Why is my child obsessed with death and talking about how they died? This is weird. This is not an average thing that children do. And then as time goes on, he starts explaining that he remembers dying. He remembers how he died. He remembers falling. And then he begins to talk about the World Trade Center. Granted, this little boy was born years and years after 9/11. The mother, the grandmother, the family basically said, we never said anything about 9/11 to him. He's never been to New York. He's never seen the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers at this point are decimated. They're gone. They're not there anymore. He starts making reference to things that him being in his office in the tower and how he could see the Statue of Liberty outside of his window, which a kid has probably come across the Statue of Liberty or learned it or seen it on TV. So that I could pass as like, maybe that's something he recollected from hearing a story. Mm-hmm. But then he explains that he could see himself die. And another interesting thing is, in past lives, they talk about how people basically are seeing it from like a third person. So they're seeing their death, like as if they were standing on the stairs and watching it happen over here. So he says he remembers falling out of a tall building and then the rubble basically like crushing him, like going on top of him and crushing him. So again, the mother is like very distraught because she's like, how does he know these things? We've never talked about it. He's never seen a TV show. And then one of the things that they have children do often is to draw what they see, draw what their nightmares are, draw what the visions that they're seeing in their mind to help them understand. So when they give him paper and they have him draw it, he draws 2 twin towers with a plane flying into one of them and a man jumping out. And
Shit.
it's like he's seen the videos of, on the news where they showed it actually happening as he's seen it. And she's like, there's no way my 3-year-old has ever seen that. There's no reason we would have shown this. He's never been like basically out of their care where he could have been at a friend's house. He's 3 watching it on the TV or watching old footage. And then as they're kind of trying to work through this, and the article was based on, I think it was on Bio Channel. So there was like an interview with the mom and the grandmother. And one interesting thing is the boy says, and he's a little bit older now, he says that we don't die. He reassures his mother over and over again. He said it very often that we don't die, and that he chose her. Which like even saying that gives me chills because that little boy, to try to explain to an adult that should know more than a 3 or a 4-year-old should know, telling them that basically our energy doesn't go away. It just goes somewhere else. And clearly for him, it went into this body of this little boy named Cade, and he chose her. Why he doesn't explain, and I don't think at that point can comprehend why you would say those things. You're just saying that because that's what you know to say. His 3-year-old mind isn't necessarily like, it can't process everything. It's only processing parts of the things that he's remembering from the past life. So one thing that I find like especially interesting is like, where does that come from? What in that little boy's mind when he turned 3 did the switch go off and was like, now I'm going to express this whole past life?
There was a whole study and they were saying that like 80% of the people who start talking about this, children, obviously kids can't really start speaking until they're 3, but at 35 months, that's when the recollection of their past lives start. And then
so they're building it up and building it up and building it up.
And then by the age of 6, once they kind of get it all out, that's when that fades and they can become like, 'cause there was this kid and he was an old Hollywood actor. I remember that one. I watched the interview, and then like as they were doing it, he was a little bit older, and he's like, yeah, like I really don't remember a lot of that anymore, to be honest. Yeah. Like it all came to him like a flash, and he had to get it out, kind of like an edema of the mental state.
Just get it out.
Just get it out. And I think for them, it's euphoric to tell that story, and they don't know where it comes from, but it's also important for them to like, reach the point where they can talk about it, which is 3 years old, 35 months, and then be able to just flush it and be the new person.
Well, so this little boy also, there was like a little interview clip where he's driving in a car. I believe he's with his dad, and they're in downtown. I don't know what city that they're in, but it's in downtown. There's tons of like skyscrapers and buildings, and he is like crying. He's distraught. He's afraid of the planes. Sorry, not the planes. He's afraid of the buildings. And he says like to his dad out loud, like, yeah, that shiny one, it brings back a lot. It's like the World Trade Center. It brings back a lot of memories. And he's like, I'm never going to go in there. I'm loosely quoting, but he is at that age. So 3 is when he finally explains who he believes that he is. He does actually name a name. So the mother and the grandmother, they chose not to say the name because they didn't want the family of the person that actually passed away to, like maybe they're going through their mourning process or they're over it and they don't want to like bring back those old memories. But she did end up coming across some information. Some information was given to her, and she researched the person, and she found the guy that the son said he was. And she's like, everything kind of lined up. So it's really hard not to believe him that he's saying what he actually believes is true. And again, he struggled with making new friends. He was afraid of a lot of things. So the little boy struggled being normal. And there was no kind of closure to it saying like he's doing better now. This is an old interview. But a lot of these kids are struggling to be normal because they don't believe that they are who their parents are telling them that they are. So you think about that boy that you're talking about, the parents are like, no, that's not who you are. You're Cade. You're not so-and-so. So they're suppressing those emotions and suppressing those thoughts and feelings because they're being told by everyone around them, no, that's not who you are. So imagine after a while, you're going to start believing that, and then it just goes
like
away.
hiding the,
Yeah.
closing the door on that memory.
Which is sad, but also kind of brings me back to what I was saying before is like, he clearly isn't 100% that person. He's having these memories of that person. They're kind of fragmented, but they're coming together to develop the story. But it's still Cade.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
think maybe the soul heals in that way where it's like they can get it out and then it can grow into the next person almost. And I don't know how that works because it's energy. But maybe the energy, kind of like a source, has to finish the job and it has to tell the story in another way to be able to move on with.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer of like, things happen the way that they're supposed to. And if there's things that say a person, you see this with a lot of ghost stories, there's something that person or entity needed to finish, they needed closure. They still had work to do in the world. And I believe that is they're using this little boy or those little girls or the other little boy as a vessel to finish whatever it is that they need to finish or get closure, whatever it is that they need to do. And then once they do it, it goes away.
Yeah.
You know, or it transfers into the little boy and he goes on and lives his life.
Yeah, because I mean, just with our 3 stories that we just shared, all of them had tragic endings, like
All of them.
quick, like something that, like they didn't have a chance to like, I don't know, think
Finish.
about it or something.
Yeah.
Like it just kind of came.
Yeah. And all of them were they all meet the criteria of the signs. Obviously, they all
'cause
hit
they're
those.
not a natural death. It's
Right.
like a very sudden, abrupt, scenario. Kind of like ghosts. Unless you're from Mars. Which is what brings me to my little tidbit last story about a Russian boy who claims he was an alien from Mars. Which this is probably the most interesting story I've ever heard. Like for reincarnation, but really just for kids saying weird shit, which sounds very true. Boriska, who they already started seeing weird signs with him. Like he was really intelligent. At 15 days old, he was holding his own head up, like just like a boss ass motherfucker. By 1 year old,
Boss ass baby.
by 1, he could read, write,
No.
draw, and paint. And he knew things about space and like themes about space. And he would say, I'm from Mars. And he would meditate as a 1 year old.
Were his parents like super smart, like scientists or anything?
Nope. This is what they were like, what the fuck? So he would meditate and he would talk to something and it would teach him things as like a 1 year old. Like, he
Is
would
this guy
sit there-
alive still?
I don't know. Because
Boriska?
I mean, we could look him up. But yeah, he would be learning from something else. So then at 7, he started talking about, which is a little bit later than usual, but he started talking about
But he probably realized how
Yeah.
smart he was, and if like I say
he was
something,
super
they're gonna
fucking smart.
Yeah.
So at 7, he started talking about his past life. He was an alien who breathed carbon dioxide on Mars, and he was talking about all these very distinct things by, what people were like there. Like by age 35, you just stopped aging, and you'd always be 35. All these very specific things, like people were very tall and people were still on Mars. So this was a long ass time ago when there was that whole theory that they believed that there was a civilization on Mars way more, advanced than us. And something happened between Mars and I almost said America as the globe. Mars and Earth. And there was essentially like a nuclear war and it wiped out all of Mars. And a lot of, and I'm going to fuck this up because I'm not a scientist, but a lot of scientists have said there's certain traces of materials that would say there was a nuclear kind of situation 3,000 years ago. So he talks about that. He was in the war and they were hiding in Mars. So he said he used to fly from Earth to Mars because he was in the military and they had like triangle planes and all of this shit. So he was talking about
He's
how like
7.
Yeah, he's 7 years old. So he's giving like all these very distinct facts about like the planet and the water sources and how people would function in society and how there was easy transport from Mars to Earth. And he was like talking very blankly about being like, yeah, Mars still has interaction with Earth. Why aren't you guys noticing this? Like, there's like, he's saying like, there's alien
Where is
shit
this
happening.
man?
He's in Russia.
Let's go to Russia.
I mean, this was probably, I forget when it was. It was probably
Is
in
he
the 80s.
alive?
He's probably alive.
alive.
He's probably like in his 30s now.
Boriska?
Thinking he's going to be, Boriska. But I just thought that was super fascinating.
He's probably in prison because they're like, you have said too
well,
much.
He's probably, I don't know, maybe he's probably in the government.
I also want to know, like, if he is alive, what is he thinking about? Because, like, there's all this talk of like bringing people to Mars now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm wondering if he's like, no, my family's
He's probably
there.
working for Blue Origin or something. We just don't know.
But so you figure 7 years old. 7 years old, you have when you're 5, you go to kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
Or first grade or something around there.
I don't know
So-
anything about kids.
No, I'm
I don't
just
know
saying-
anything about kids.
A lot of people don't know that at age 7 you would be what, in second grade, first grade or second grade? I don't know. First grade, first or second grade. So see, she's trying to make me feel dumb over there. I'm like, I'm right. You are not learning about science and planets
aliens
and aliens
And carbon
in-
dioxide.
and carbon
and-
dioxide in first grade. Granted, he was obviously very smart. He was reading, so he could have found a book that was about the planets and the solar system and gotten information. But to develop this whole world,
There was specific things, like he was saying how they were trying to create a second sun, and that's why Pluto has a spot on it, because that was where they failed. Like all this weird shit. And he's 7. And then there's a spot on fucking Pluto.
yeah.
Like, it's weird shit.
Do you believe he's an alien?
Yeah.
I feel like he
He
has to
lifted
be
that
an
big
alien.
old head at 15 days old.
Wait,
He's
so
got
he's
some knowledge.
an alien?
He was
or
an
he-
alien. He's now.
So he has
He
the
was in
spirit
his-
of
so
an
in his
alien?
past life.
His soul was from an alien species.
And that's why he knows all
Yep.
these things. Well, that means he would know a lot of things about like how to make the world a better place. So Bariska, you better step up to the plate and fix this
We got
catastrophe.
baristas and they got baristas over there, so we got to switch this up. Like,
That's pretty interesting. I never came across any of them that were like otherworldly.
Yeah.
Everything was
That's
like
so interesting.
a tragedy of, in
Yeah.
the war
it shows
or whatever.
that energy can really travel, I guess.
I mean,
Yeah, if it can travel that far.
Yeah, that's a fucking hall. You better have your Dunkaroos in your rocket
maybe
ship.
he's in your hallway.
Oh, I fucking
your-
hope not.
You should look up what he looks like.
Oh,
Wait,
well,
what does
he's
this
a
guy
very
look
cute
like?
kid.
He's a cute kid, but
What's
he's a
his
man
name
now.
again?
Bariska. Just look up like Bariska,
Bariska, UFO alien man
reincarnation.
from Russia.
He's a cute little kid.
So-
He's got nice eyebrows. He looks like he has his intelligence all locked into that head.
So AJ believes that she was a minor in her past life. Do you have a specific life that you think that you were?
I want to believe that I was someone who was like a flapper, but I feel like I worked in like a bar or something, because I have this very like bizarre obsession with like speakeasies and that vibe. Like I love like little, yeah, that's the kid. He's so cute.
Let me see.
He's a little cutie.
Oh, he's cute.
He
He
looks
looks like
like,
he's like 13 there though.
He looks like that kid in that movie that's mean. He's like a little
well, that's
like,
specific.
mean kid.
He's the mean kid in a movie.
Anyways, I think I was either a 1920s whore or I
Or-
worked in a bordello, or maybe I was a bartender or something, or like a little chick in a cute dress who smoked a lot of nice cigarettes. I don't know.
The drinky, a lot of bevies.
I had a lot of
Lot of
maybe
be-
that's
lot
why
of
I'm
bevies.
allergic now, because in my past life I was an alcoholic.
Yeah, and they're like, nope,
They're
nope.
like, no
don't
diggity,
drink it.
bitch.
And then you're like, I don't care. I'm drinking
Put
anyway.
that cup down, you fucker.
I want to believe that I feel like my past life had something to do with either animals or like the outdoors.
You were a bee.
I might have been
Yeah.
a bee. That's unfortunate because I don't live very long,
No.
4 to 6 weeks. I had a short life.
Just transferring to multiple
Yeah.
bees and then to you.
Yep.
And now I keep bees.
Yeah.
But I feel like I don't know what this could have been or what it would have been associated with, but I'm super OCD about like being organized and like putting things away and having things line up. And it could, again, just,
She worked at a supermarket.
it could just be OCD, or I worked at like the Container Store. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I feel like my past life would have had something to do with like nature outside or being very organized, which doesn't really narrow
Maybe
much
you
down.
were like living on a prairie and you organized rocks and you eventually made a wall.
That would be, that's the
I thought you were
dream.
gonna say she was living on a prayer.
We're all living on a prayer. She was living on a prayer. She was in the
for
Oregon
sure living
Trail.
on a prayer.
Her cow died on the way.
In the Oregon Trail. No, I feel like maybe I've always wanted a farm, and I don't know where that comes from because I grew up in Pasadena and that wasn't like, there was no farms in
that's not really
Pasadena.
a farm area.
But that's like my goals is to have like a ton of land with animals and gardens and flowers, and it would be very organized. All my gardens would be like very lined up.
She aligns all the goat poop before she scoops it.
The goats would be potty trained.
It'd be
It
in
would be-
diapers.
They wouldn't be diapers. That's good. Then I could change dirty goat
That's
diapers.
true.
I would potty train them. I'd get them like little squatty potties, and they would learn how to use the.
That's where it's at. Sponsor us.
So I can't say that I was like a farmer, or maybe I was a farmer. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have enough information to point it to any specific profession.
There's probably a 70% chance you were a farmer because there's so much fucking farming before our time.
That's
like, what else
true.
were you
There's
doing?
there's a
farming
that's
or
true.
fucking. You were farming or at war. Like,
What are you trying to say?
farming, fucking, or military. That was the past.
If I had to pick out of all of the three, I would say I would pick farming. What would you pick?
I don't know.
I guess I'd pick farming
You guys can all be
because
on
I'm
my
tired.
farm. And then in the backyard of my farm, I have a gold mine, and you
Oh,
worked
yeah,
in the
there you go.
mine.
Yeah.
And I worked at the bar in your
And
barn.
I
Called the bar. And then the end is like,
it's the bar dash.
the bar. Come to the bar.
Is it in a barn?
Yeah, but
duh.
like, yeah, it's in a barn.
I have a farm. Where else would it be?
Or there's a sign and it says barn, but the N is knocked off, so it's
Oh.
just like
Yeah.
sun, like
Oh, it has
bleached
like the
into it.
bleach,
So
yeah.
the bar is still there, but you can just kind of see the N.
There it is.
I mean,
well, why don't we just do this now?
I know this sounds really fun. We could
Yeah,
be away
we
from
could do this
people.
now.
We could
Fuck
have our
LA.
own land. You could mine
Commune.
gold.
It's a commune.
The only problem is we have to find.
Cameron's our cult leader.
Is he?
We're
That's
just,
where the pyramids come from.
Yeah.
Oh,
oh, fuck.
yeah. We
Here it
didn't.
all
Maybe you were
is.
in
We
like a
didn't-
cult in your past life.
Maybe
Is that why I hate men so much?
Dark Lord is
Because
holding.
I was in a
Illuminati.
polygamous relationship.
You're a bartender on the side.
Yeah, I was like not getting tipped well, and I was like, fuck you guys. And they're like, no, bitch, you got to pay your rent. And I was like, okay.
I gotta go back to the bar.
Well, we should do the past life regression thing.
Yeah.
With each other.
Oh,
and try
yeah.
to figure out. What
Wait, can
our
we do it
past
to
life-
each other?
No. You need
I mean, I
need
think
a
I
professional
think
past
we
life
need a professional
regressioner.
because if not, I think you can get.
So explain
You
to
can
the
get
people
kinda
that
messed
don't
up.
know what it is.
So
what it is.
past life regression is basically where you. I watched a video on it where this girl did it and she got like a psychiatrist to kind of help her. So you get into like this meditative state where you first she kind of walked her through kind of like past memories of herself. And then she was like, okay, now you're coming across this bridge and that's going to bridge you into your past life. So then once she crossed that bridge in her mind, she started kind of remembering and getting all these feelings and seeing things that she said like she looked down and her hands were like a man's hands, like an older
That's
man.
the worst.
And
You need to get a
I have
manicure.
man hands.
Really, I'm like, why are my hands so big? Was I an ogre in a past life, or am I just chunky? Shit. Continue.
But she was getting all these emotions to where she was looking into it a little bit more and kind of piecing together that this is also, actually it's kind of weird that I'm talking about this, but she like kind of gold rush era and she was leaving her
circle.
family to go and find gold. So she, like when she was doing this process, she was feeling loss over not seeing her family anymore. But then
Like emotions she weren't really hers
Yeah.
at the time.
and she was just being flooded with it. So basically it's just like going into this meditative state and trying to tap into that part of your brain that would have your memories or stuff from your past life.
So like hypnotherapy guiding you in the direction of like
yeah.
old memories.
Mhm.
So did the woman go to this psychiatrist thinking that she had a past life, or was she just going for like a
The one
hey,
that I
jiggle my
watched,
brain around a little bit,
she-
get in there?
she had heard something about kind of past lives and reincarnation and she just thought it was interesting. And she read a book and then that's what led her to, she's like, well, I'm kind of skeptic, but at the same time, I want to just learn more about this.
Yeah.
So that's when she kind of looked into it and, which kind of makes me believe her a little bit more and like her story a little bit more because like, obviously if you fully believe it and you're 100% like, invested in this idea, if someone kind of just like like, if the psychiatrist
Like,
it's
nudges
just kind of
her.
nudges you
Yeah.
a little bit, you will I just feel like you will take that on 100%. But
Right.
like if you're a little more skeptic and you're like, I'm not sure and question everything, but then some real kind of information comes out of it, then I think that's a little more believable for me at least.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same thing like we've talked about, like with ghosts and stuff. If you're like, know that this kind of thing, this type of spirit haunts this area and you see something, you're going to associate it with that thing because
Yeah.
that's what you know. So, I mean, I would be really interested to do that. And I think it would be really cool to record that process because I feel like
I'd be drooling through it or something if it's video. They'd be like, yes, I was that. I've never been hypnotized, but
I've
I feel
never
like
been
it'd fuck you up
hypnotized.
like dentist style.
I always watch those like hypnosis videos where they're like, every time you hear a bell, you're going to moo like a cow. And I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
fuck
shit.
that.
I know they're
want
supposed to
things
like undo
that.
that stuff, but I don't
think
need
it's
to
not
be mooing
quite
like a
that.
cow.
I have a friend who did it, so I could probably ask her if we would like to do it to give us her info.
Yeah, to find out. I think
Yeah.
that would be super interesting because I feel like it could change your life. It could not change your life. It could just be a cool thing to know.
It could be a cool thing if someone was giving you shit at McDonald's and you're like, don't give me half of a thing of fries. I was the Queen of France in 1872, you dildo. Like, give me like the full fries.
You better overflow my fry container so there's like
you
extra
don't know
fries.
who I am, but you will. Give me a full stack, baby.
I mean, that's a bargaining chip if I've ever heard one.
I mean,
so.
Apparently
That's
McDonald's.
the
Watch
vibe.
out.
Watch out, McDonald's. You are a block away from me, but I have high and mighty expectations the next time I go in there.
So next on the list is we're all going to get hypnotized and figure out who we were in a past life.
Watch
Yeah.
me be like a peasant butcher.
Because that's
with,
what
like,
I feel
3
like.
fingers.
What if it's really like sad?
Well,
what if they're like you were
feel
a shit
triumphant
scooper?
That in this life you aren't a
Yeah.
shit scooper.
That's true.
Elevation.
I moved up.
Is
I
the
don't.
new
I
black.
know.
In my
Yeah.
next life.
I still scoop the cat's shit, but that's about it. That's where I draw the line.
Well, shit.
It's when Cam
Literally.
starts pooping on the floor. That's when you draw the line.
I'm like, I'm not picking up human poop.
Well, we'll see in 30 years.
That's
Might-
true. True
Might
love.
need a catheter.
True love prevails over all. And with that, I think that'll do it for this
think that's
episode
it.
of
Let's
Let's
end
Get-
this
I think
now.
we should go. But one interesting thing, if you have any stories of past lives or you have a personal past life story, feel free to DM us, send us a message. We would love to hear your stories. Dark Lord says put it in the comments below. But if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, you're going to have to send us a DM on Instagram. And we're at Let's Get Spooky Show. So with that, that'll do it. Thanks for tuning in, Fiends, for this episode of Let's Get Spooky. I'm Leanna Vale.
I'm AJ.
I'm Ashley.
And don't forget to
Stay spooky.
Or am I the Queen of France?
And get those McDonald's fully
Now I want
fries.
French
fully
fries.
I know. Well, now I know what I'm getting.
French fries.